Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the SimNFL show. I am your host and commissioner. You can call me Pierce. We're going to dive right in today to the final week of preseason action. That's week 3. We're going to go over some of the key games and best performances. And after a brief recap, we're going to dive into the NFC predictions. Last week I talked about the AFC, so I'm going to do the same with the NFC this week. We're going to look at some rookies who I think are going to have good statistical first seasons, and then a couple that might struggle to put up some good stats, at least early on, in my eyes. And then we are going to go on to predictions for the conference, see who I think are going to win the division and who in total is going to make the playoffs. And then we'll have a final brief message, and then we will look at look forward into week 1 as we get ready to start the regular season and the games that count. So we'll do a quick preview there as well. So thanks for tuning in. Let's dive right into it. Had a all Florida battle in the preseason in week 3 in the AFC, with Miami defeating Jacksonville 27-19. Big day for Dean Hammonds, throwing 56 passes for 424 yards. Favorite target there was Kenny White, who had 12 catches for 143 yards. Matt Howard, on the other hand, found the end zone a couple times, but was only 12 of 27 for 150 yards with those 2 touchdowns. Also, he was pretty much their entire offense, as the Jacksonville rushing attack had 17 total carries for 18 total yards. So that 150 from Howard was pretty much everything, especially the 68 yards and the touchdown to Ray Thompson. Very promising wide receiver for Jacksonville. And then Kenny Daniel, we talked about him last week. I said I think he's going to have a big statistical season, and he showed up in this final preseason game as well. 11 tackles, 1.5 for a loss. Also have to mention Michael Berger over on the Dolphins. 4 tackles for loss and forcing a fumble. Another name with the Dolphins we talked about last week was Ejiofor, the second overall pick. He had 6 catches on 12 targets, but only 12 total yards. So still working on getting a rapport with Dean Hammonds. Mostly been utilizing him for short routes so far. But still, overall, in general, for the Miami offense, strong performance from that passing attack. So definitely, I talked about them last week, I think being a favorite in the AFC, and I think they proved that with their starters getting a victory there today, or last week, excuse me. Meanwhile, a cross-conference matchup with Chicago coming out ahead of New England by a score of 19-11. Stanley Segovia was the breakout star for the Bears in this one. 20 carries, 132 yards, and a touchdown for Segovia, who is a rookie 6th-round pick out of TCU for the Bears. So definitely making a statement with this performance, trying to earn his roster spot. Also, Robert Barr had 2 takeaways and 9 tackles for them as well. Rashawn Lyons had some promising days, at least statistically. 23 of 42, 277 yards, a touchdown and a couple picks. Not the most fantastic line, especially in a losing effort, but it is better than some of the games he's had so far. So, again, remains to be seen what he can do with this time in New England, moving over from Indianapolis in a trade this offseason. His favorite target was Vincent Allen, 8 catches for 175 yards, so 22 yard per catch average there. Big day for Allen. And then Miguel Peterson leading the way on defense with 4 tackles for loss and a sack. But still losing effort for New England, managing only 11 points. And a good look from some of Chicago's depth players there, especially, again, Segovia doing his part. Final in-depth recap, Dallas over the Chargers by a score of 56-10. This is a very talented, very deep, very scary Dallas team on both sides of the ball. Jesse Dole absolutely balling out, 21 of 33, 249 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did throw a couple interceptions. But you just look at these numbers from his skill players. Hansen, 159 yards on 17 carries, so well over 9 yards a carry out of the backfield. And then Christopher Lee, just untouchable as their top wide receiver, 12 catches, 193 yards, and a touchdown there. And then Elliott Grossman living in the Chargers backfield with 4 tackles for loss. Meanwhile, it was the Miguel Aguilera show for the Chargers, really trying to do it all there. 14 completions for 93 yards, also was their leading rusher. 14 carries for another 93 yards. That is not a typo. He posted identical stat lines passing and rushing. One standout on the defense was John Warnock, who did have both of those no interceptions. So big day for Warnock, and a lot of touches for Aguilera, but definitely a very big statement win for Dallas, putting in their starters for the first time and showing what that team is really capable of. We will talk a little bit more about them in a little bit. Some other games from around the league. Cleveland came out ahead of Philadelphia 19-6. So that's a full slate of preseason games without allowing a touchdown for that Cleveland defense, giving up a total of 4 field goals. They held Moncrief to 14 of 38 passing and picked him off twice. Meanwhile, David Avila did a good job making his case for being the primary backup to Juan Mora in that offense. 30 carries, 174 yards, and a touchdown for him. So again, cementing that RB2 spot, I think, with a big performance there. New Orleans came out ahead of Indianapolis, 17-10. That was a very preseason feeling game. There were 8 turnovers combined in that game, including 7 interceptions. So a bit of a sloppy game there. Minnesota came out ahead of Tampa Bay, just barely 14-12. I thought Dylan Gomez really took a step forward in this game. He was 19 of 34, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. So leading his team to victory there, again showing promise as a rookie quarterback. Getting the win, getting above 50% completion with a couple touchdowns. On the West Coast, we had San Francisco falling to Las Vegas, 31-18. James Agnew had 10 carries for 101 yards for the Raiders, so a nice even 10-yard per carry average for him. Very, very big day getting that offense going. Randall Hansen looked solid with the Detroit first team coming out ahead of Atlanta, 31-7. 27 of 41. Hansen was for that game, 269 yards and a couple touchdowns. So a very, very solid performance from Hansen there, who is, I believe, in a contract year with the Lions. That'll be interesting to watch where we come with that come extension time. And then a defensive battle, Buffalo and Pittsburgh, with the Steelers coming out ahead 16-6. DeAndre Wieters, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Wieters, 15 carries, 119 yards, and a touchdown for the Steelers. So again, you see a lot of great performances from starters playing together for the first time, and then some strong outputs from a lot of younger players trying to make their spots on the team. So Wieters definitely making a statement that he belongs on the Steelers with his performance that day. Luckily, most teams escaped uninjured. There was Arizona's defensive end Richard Salazar fractured his foot. He will miss 5 weeks at the start of the season. But that was the only major new injury that I saw in the games this week, thankfully. All right, so as with last week when I did rookie stocks for the AFC, we are shifting over to the NFC today. Premise is very simple. If the drafted rookies were a stock market, who would you be buying and selling in? Who would you be investing in and divesting from as you look forward to the season? And in this case, I'm specifically looking at statistics. Who do you think statistically is going to have a good year? So this is not necessarily good pick, bad pick. It's how do I think these players will perform in their rookie year on the stat sheet. Some players that I'm really buying into, Stanley Alvarez for New Orleans, the top cornerback, taken off the board. Had a couple of takeaways in this preseason, a forced fumble and an interception. So always good to see young players getting around the ball and making plays on the football and making big takeaways. That's what you want from your defensive superstars. So I think a good start for Alvarez there. Logan Lopez over in Atlanta, 8th overall pick. Starting out strong with 11 tackles and 4 tackles for loss. So I expect to see him playing alongside Ray Jackson and some of those other established starters. Atlanta has an interesting situation, though, on the defensive line. They have 2 other defensive tackles. They have Marco Everett, who is a 67 overall in his 5th year. Paul McHenry is a 64 in his 4th year, and both have pretty decent potentials. Meanwhile, you have Lopez, who's a 61 and an F potential, but 8th overall pick. So I would expect him to at least be in the mix, in the rotation, starting with week 1. I don't know if they have him slotted as like DD1 or 2 or as a rotating starter, but I would expect him to get some playing time, especially with that high pick and with that low potential. He's going to need those snaps to progress and be worthy of that selection. So I expect to see him. Richard Bianchi of Detroit, 23rd overall pick, had a stellar preseason, 60 total carries over all 3 games, 342 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's in a competition with Cooper McGuff for that starting spot, but I think he's done enough to earn at least a share of those carries. 60 touches, almost 6 yards per carry on that. And again, that's on the ground. Not very many catches for him, even though he's a receiving type. So even for that not being his element, I think he's definitely shown up big, and I expect him to have at least some number of carries for that Detroit offense. One concern, he did have 2 fumbles in those 3 games, so ball security might be an issue and might hurt his stock a little bit there. And finally, can't leave the NFC without talking about Andrew Moncrief, 4th round pick. I think he has shown up really well for a rookie quarterback. He did struggle in that game against Cleveland, so now his total numbers, he's just under the 50% completion mark for the total preseason. He's 38 of 78. 453 yards through the air, though, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. So, again, for a 4th round pick, I think that's a solid performance and indicative of if he can get some good growth where he could go from there. Now, obviously, this is like a buy and hold scenario. The pool party is not ending anytime soon in Philadelphia. But having Moncrief there as a backup and as a potential future starter, I think it is a great situation for them. Also, it's worth pointing out that Moncrief did all of that in an offense that is very much not suited to him. They ran pretty much the offense they ran for Poole, who is a scrambler, and Moncrief is very much a pocket quarterback. As you can see by how many times he ran the ball. So to get 450 yards out of that in an offense that's not suited to you as a 4th round rookie, I think is a big deal and bodes well for his future. On the other side of things, again, looking at statistically, I'm curious about where Paul Canha will go in his rookie season. He had no stats in his first 2 games, and then 4 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown this most recent game. So pretty much he had a single 60-yard reception that was most of his production for the preseason. So in that very run-heavy offense, or what I think will be a run-heavy offense, looking at their backs and their linemen, might not have the biggest statistical year, especially playing opposite Matthew Madden, who is a definite wide receiver number 1. Although maybe teams focus on Madden, maybe they double him up, and so maybe Canha gets more numbers as a result of that. But I am hedging as far as his statistical production in that first year in that Giants offense. Again, can't say this enough. Not saying it's a bad pick, just saying I don't expect him to light up the stat sheet in his first year. Similarly, Clayton McGee over in Seattle has 3 carries for 10 yards in the preseason. So certainly seems like Yaxel Knox has a hold on the number 1 spot there, and we'll see the bulk of the carries. So we might see McGee rotated in, but I don't expect him to be a feature back for them. at least in his first season. And then Paul Fowler, who was picked in the top of the second round by San Francisco, did not show up on the stat sheet for 3 weeks. Again, I don't know what their depth chart situation is. I don't know if he was rotated in or not played as much. Currently, the 49ers DE2 is a 61 overall in his 7th year, which is technically better than Fowler. But again, if you pick a guy that high, I expect you at least rotate him in, at least in the preseason. So the fact that he didn't see the field or didn't rack up any tackles in preseason does not bode well for his performance in this first year. So I have a sell grade on him for that. Taking a broader look at the entire NFC, we can see here with the playoff teams for last year. It was a very top-heavy year for the conference. Four teams with 12 or more victories, and then Chicago at 10-7 being the only other team even with a winning record, putting both Tampa and Philly in with 6 and 7 wins respectively. So very, very top-heavy as of last year. And then going forward for this year, I see a lot of the same. I have the Rams taking that top spot by virtue of that very, very formidable offense and the competition they'll be facing out in the West. Dallas, I have at number 2, a very, very strong team, as we saw what their starters could do against the Chargers. And honestly, heads up against the Rams, I think it could go either way. But as far as seeding goes, Dallas is in a much tougher division in that NFC East, so I think they will lose just more division games by virtue of their strength of schedule. So I have them at number 2, but still a very, very, very strong team. I'm keeping Chicago in command of the NFC North, so have them at the 3 seed. And then I think Carolina breaks through and posts the best record in the South. Now, I don't know if that's a 7-win season or an 8 or a 9-win season. I think it depends on how much they can beat up on their division rivals and what kind of a schedule bump they get from last year's placement. But someone has to win the NFC South, and I think it can be Carolina with the pieces that they've put together and with an amazing draft they had this year and last. So with all those first-round picks, I think we're going to start to see dividends there, and I have Carolina coming in at number 4. I have Washington as the top wild card. I think they're going to be a very good team, maybe not 16-1. They did seem fallible in the preseason, not quite as stratospheric, and they have an interesting quarterback situation going. So we will see how that resolves. But I still think they're going to be, a solid team, probably 12 or 13 win team, and get the top wild card. And then Philadelphia as well. They were in the playoffs last year. They snuck in on that last seed on the final day. And it's going to be tough with Dallas and Washington in the same division, but I think they have a strong team. I think they have a very explosive offense and a young and developing defense. So I think they can make the wild card as well. And then lastly, I have Green Bay getting in there. I know Joseph Garibay had a tough first outing with 4 interceptions. But I think they're going to bounce back from that, move around the game plan, figure out a way to maximize his strengths. And I don't think they'll catch Chicago in the North, but I think they can put together enough wins for a playoff seed. And again, this is the NFC, so that number might be more attainable than it would be over in the AFC. So only 2 new playoff teams. I think it's still going to be very top-heavy. I think the teams that were good last year are going to stay good for a while. But I think we are going to see a little bit of movement. So next week, the games count as we get into the start of the regular season. So very excited for this. Kickoff Thursday night is going to be the Super Bowl champion at home. So Miami at Denver. I think this is going to be a fantastic game. Denver with 2 Super Bowl appearances to their name, and then Miami, a team I think will be the premier team in the AFC. But they're going to have to prove it starting week 1 on the road. So that's how we will kick off the season there. In the early slot on Sunday, we have Tennessee at Tampa Bay. And then, so a rare cross-conference season opener for those 2. And then Chicago at Green Bay. I have a divisional matchup there. Again, two teams I think can be playoff contenders out of the North, um, with Green Bay having the home field advantage to start off. So we will see whether my faith in them is well placed. In the afternoon slot, we have Buffalo going to Las Vegas. I think, again, two very strong teams. Um, Las Vegas with a very established passing game, and then Buffalo, an up-and-comer, Yusei Asensio. So we will see how those two square off. Could see a lot of points in that one. And then the rest of the prime time slate, Cincinnati will be at Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh had the top seed last year, with Cincinnati being a strong wild card, so they will face off in a division game. And then Philadelphia is taking the pool party on the road. They will go up to Minnesota and play there on Monday night. So again, a team maybe not at the top, but certainly able to hold their own in a strong division versus Minnesota trying to be an up-and-comer. So they will be our first Monday night game of the season, and I'm excited to see that. So before I log off for today, just going to say that obviously the season is starting this week, which means that all those months of preparation and planning and asking questions and figuring things out and fiddling with the game plan and searching for the best free agents and doing your draft research, all that's going to come to fruition starting next week. Lots of expectations are very high. Everyone's optimistic, and it can be tough in that first week when maybe things don't go the way you think they will. Maybe you think your team was better on paper, but they lose to an inferior opponent. Maybe there's a key injury. Maybe something weird happens with the sim late in the game, or just things in general don't go as you suppose. Encourage everyone to take a deep breath and have fun and enjoy the sim. Try to have a positive attitude, because the sim is going to sim, but it's fun when we can all hang out together and talk about the games, and bring a positive attitude. So I'm very much looking forward to it. I have high hopes for my team as well, but determined to enjoy myself no matter the outcome, and just love this league and love everything that everyone brings to it. And hanging out on game days is one of my favorite parts of the week. So looking forward to it. Hope you are as well. Remember to enjoy it, take a breath, have fun, and I will see you next week.